The war hero stood at the checkout counter, counting coins with trembling hands, and no one in that grocery store knew they were about to witness a moment that would change everything they believed about kindness. It was a Tuesday morning in Memphis, Tennessee, 1957, and the fluorescent lights of Piggly Wiggly hummed their usual tired song. The veteran, a man named James Crawford, stood hunched over the counter. His worn army jacket faded to a ghost of its original green. His fingers, scarred and unsteady, pushed copper pennies across the scratched formica surface one by one. Behind him, a line was forming. A woman sighed loudly. A man checked his watch with theatrical impatience. James didn't look up. He couldn't afford to lose count. Before I tell you what happened in that store, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening to this story. The cashier, a young woman named Dorothy with pin curls and bright red lipstick, watched the coins accumulate with a mixture of pity and growing discomfort. She'd seen James before. He came in every few days, always buying the same things. Day-old bread, dented cans from the discount bin, sometimes a small bag of coffee that was half price because the packaging was torn. Today it was just bread, 2 loaves. The total came to 38 cents. James had counted out 31 cents in pennies, nickels, and dimes. He was 7 cents short. "I am sorry," he said quietly, his voice rough like gravel underfoot. "I thought I had enough." Dorothy's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to say she'd cover it. She'd done it before, slipping coins from her own purse when the manager wasn't looking. But before she could speak, the man behind James in line made a sound of disgust. "For God's sake," the man muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some of us have jobs to get to." James's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. His jaw clenched so tight Dorothy could see the muscle jumping beneath the weathered skin of his face. He began to slowly, methodically, slide the coins back toward himself, his hands shaking harder now. "I'll just take 1 loaf," he said softly. That's when the door chimed. The sound was ordinary. Just the bell that rang whenever someone entered the store, but what happened next was anything but. A figure stepped through the doorway and an entire atmosphere shifted like the air before a thunderstorm. He wore dark sunglasses despite the gray morning, a purple shirt with the collar turned up, and he moved with the kind of easy confidence that made people stop mid-breath and stare at Dorothy. Recognized him immediately. Everyone in Memphis knew that face, those sideburns, that walk. Elvis Presley had just entered her grocery store. She thought she must be dreaming. This couldn't be real. But Elvis wasn't looking at her. His attention had locked onto the scene at the checkout counter with laser focus, the old soldier with his pile of coins, the impatient businessman behind him, the 2 loaves of bread sitting there like evidence of a small, quiet tragedy. Elvis crossed the distance between the door and the counter in 6 long strides. He didn't ask permission. He didn't announce himself. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a leather wallet, and placed a crisp $20 bill on the counter beside James's scattered change. "This gentleman's purchase is on me," Elvis said, his voice gentle but carrying an edge of steel. "Both loaves, and whatever else he needs." The store went silent, not the awkward silence of before, but something deeper, a collective held breath. James finally looked up, his eyes meeting Elvis's sunglasses, confusion and pride warring across his weathered face. "Son, I don't need charity," James said quietly. Elvis removed his sunglasses then, and his eyes were kind but serious. "It's not charity, sir. It's respect. I know that jacket. I know what it means." For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. James's hand moved unconsciously to the faded patch on his shoulder, the insignia of the 101st Airborne Division. Elvis's own father had served. Elvis himself had just returned from army duty in Germany the year before. He understood what that patch cost, what those shaking hands had probably done, what memories kept a man awake at night counting pennies for bread. "I'll pay you back," James said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "No need," Elvis replied. "But I'll tell you what you keep shopping. Get what you actually need. Coffee, eggs, whatever. I'm buying. The businessman who'd complained earlier had gone pale. He took a step backward, then another, as if distance might erase his earlier words. Dorothy stood frozen, her hand still hovering over the cash register around the store. Other customers had stopped pretending to shop and were openly watching. Now, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and shame, Elvis turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. His voice carried that easy Memphis warmth, but underneath it ran a current of something fierce. This man right here, he gestured, to James, wore that uniform so we could stand in stores like this and buy bread in peace. So we could complain about waiting in line. So we could go about our ordinary days without thinking twice about it. The very least we can do is show him the respect he's earned. Someone in the back started clapping. Then another person. Then the sound filled the store like a wave breaking over rocks. James's eyes had gone shiny, his jaw working as he fought to maintain composure. Dorothy found herself wiping tears from her cheeks. Her mascara probably running, but she didn't care. But Elvis wasn't finished. He looked at James directly, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, meant just for the veteran and anyone. Close enough to hear. My daddy told me something once, Elvis said. He said the measure of a man isn't in what he takes, but in what he gives when he's got nothing left to give. You gave everything, sir. Let somebody give back for once. James's defenses crumbled then. His shoulders dropped, and he nodded once, a single sharp movement that spoke volumes. Elvis clapped him gently on the shoulder, then turned to Dorothy. Ring up whatever he needs, ma'am, and add a good steak. Some vegetables. Make it enough for a week. For the next 20 minutes, Elvis walked through the store with James Crawford, filling a cart with groceries, real groceries, not just the dented cans and day-old bread. They talked quietly as they moved through the aisles. And though Dorothy couldn't hear their conversation, she saw James's posture gradually straighten, saw something like light return to his eyes. When they returned to the checkout, the cart was coffee, fresh bread, meat, milk, eggs, vegetables, even a small chocolate bar that Elvis had tossed in with a wink. The total came to $18.67. Elvis paid without blinking, then helped James carry the bags to an old pickup truck in the parking lot. Through the store window, Dorothy watched them shake hands. She watched Elvis say something that made James laugh, an actual laugh. His head thrown back, genuine joy breaking through decades of hardship. She watched Elvis wait until James had driven away before he got into his own Cadillac. But before Elvis left, he came back inside. He found Dorothy at her register and placed another $20 bill in her hand. Next time you see someone come up short, he said quietly, you take care of it. When this runs out, you let me know. Dorothy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Elvis put his sunglasses back on, tipped an imaginary hat, and walked out the door. Like he hadn't just performed a miracle in the middle of a Tuesday morning. The story spread through Memphis like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew what Elvis had done. Some people said it was just a publicity stunt. Others argued about whether veterans should need charity at all. But Dorothy knew what she'd seen. She'd seen a young man at the height of his fame stop everything to honor an old soldier's dignity. She'd seen kindness meet need in the exact moment it was required. Dot and James Crawford. He came back to that store every week for the next decade. But he never came up short again. Dorothy later learned that Elvis had arranged for a monthly check to be sent, not charity, but payment for consulting services that gave James the dignity of having earned it. The two men became quiet friends, meeting sometimes for coffee, talking about music and memory and what it meant to serve, because kindness doesn't vanish, it waits, and it finds its way back. And sometimes on an ordinary Tuesday morning in a grocery store in Memphis, it arrives wearing a purple shirt and sunglasses, reminding us all that greatness isn't measured in fame or fortune. But in the moment, we choose to see another person struggle and decide, without hesitation, to help carry the weight. James Crawford kept that receipt in his wallet until the day he died 38 cents for 2 loaves of bread. Paid for by a king who understood that sometimes the smallest gestures echo the loudest. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. And if you believe the world needs more moments like this, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember that kindness still exists, waiting in the most unexpected places.